In my opinion, staffs are actually incredibly well balanced, which surprised me at first because there are so many other weapon categories that definitely need the same treatment and that I felt like should have gotten the same treatment. I also want to preface this by saying nearly every staff in this list has a pretty decent niche, so each does have some use, even if I make it sound like it's irredeemable garbage. So, without further ado, enjoy this ranking. At number 12 is the Man Grub staff. So the reason I made the disclaimer at the beginning of this video is because of this staff. And that's because it is a very niche staff. In general, this staff gains all of its scaling from luck. No intelligence scaling, no faith scaling. No, it's all luck. And that doesn't show up on the screen at all unless you look at the item description, but that's it. And that is the only good thing about it. For luck sorcerers, people who, I don't know, have a lot of luck stats but want to use sorceries maybe, this is actually a really good choice. This is probably actually your best choice because that luck scaling, though you can't really see it, it does put in work. It really does. However, there are a lot of negatives as well. And this is for the majority of people. That's what these negatives are for. For luck build, you should go with this. For every other sorcerer, you don't need to look at this staff. So first things first is the fact that it gains no scaling from intelligence, which is already a little bit of a weird choice, but I can forgive it. That's like a niche, right? But no sorceries require luck at all, which basically means you still have intelligence requirements that you have to hit to use those spells anyway. So you're gonna have to dip into intelligence anyway in order to use the spells. Why are you using a luck scaling staff for that? That just doesn't make sense to me. But that can all be forgiven. Genuinely, I can forgive that. But the worst part is the fact that it is a tier 2 covenant item, which is very bad. For anybody who isn't farming, doing online, it is a fate worse than death. That's all I'm going to say. I had to farm for this thing because I don't do online play often, and for that reason, this was hell to get. So I can definitively say that is the worst part of it. So is this weapon niche? Yes, absolutely. Can it work? Yes, there's no doubt about that. But I personally just don't want to dedicate time to make it do what I want. It seems like a waste, especially considering the fact that you're already going to be investing intelligence just to use the spells. And number 11 is the Medicant staff. So if you are a soul farmer, this is actually a pretty decent choice, but realistically, you don't need this, at all. The best part, the real niche of this staff, is the fact that it gives a 20% boost to soul acquisition. Now that's good. That is a good percentage. Stuff like the Shield of Want also gives a 20%. That's good. That's a really good percentage. But that's it. The spell buff isn't fantastic. Scaling isn't fantastic. And overall, the real issues that I have with this is actually in acquisition. Because you find it in a hidden area, very well hidden area, mind you, Archdragon Peak. And it has a, extremely low drop rate. I don't know the numbers, because I'm not smart enough for that. But it is low. And because of that, you actually have to farm for the staff, which isn't super needed. This staff's niche is not needed because of all the other farming tools. Symbol of Avarice, the ring, a Silver Serpent ring. You got all that. You have all of that. And that just means that this staff is not that needed. And I don't want to farm for it if it's not needed. It just completely ruins the point of it for me. So, I don't want to use it, and that's just how it goes. Number 10 is the Storyteller staff. So this one actually makes me laugh a lot because you have a poison staff in a spell category that just doesn't have any other poison tools. And what's even worse is the fact that this poison is the best type of poison there is. Objectively. I just want that to get into your skull. How do you do that? How do you you consciously made that decision? So let's go over what I mean by this. Obviously, I said that this is a poison staff, and the reason why is because it has a fantastic skill. I'm not a fan of poison, as I've said many times. I think status is still garbage in this game, but if there was ever a tool for making poison good, it would be the skill on this staff, because it is very powerful. The poison that it produces has very high buildup, and the poison does extra damage, and it even outclasses the pyromancy versions of it. With the downside is it doesn't scale with anything. So later game, like, you're not going to be getting higher damage or higher buildup. It's going to be the same. And the other good thing about the staff in general is the fact that it can be found very early. Now, it does also have a very low drop rate, 4% drop rate, but you can technically find it early. And that's kind of where the other con comes in, is the fact that everything else is mid. I can get it early, I can have incredible poison buildup, but that doesn't mean a lot. And I still personally think that status sucks, so having poison does not do a lot in my mind to justify all the lower scalings of the staff. However, if you are a poison build who maybe wants to use sorceries, or maybe just wants poison that works well, you're gonna want to farm for this, because its poison is downright evil. And yeah, it doesn't work against any bosses, don't get your hopes up, but like against anything that can get poisoned, it'll kill it for sure. Number 9 is the Archdeacon staff. So this one actually does have a decent niche, in my opinion, but like the Luck staff, I still believe it has critical flaws that genuinely make it difficult for me to justify its higher placing at all. So pros, let's get those out of the way first. This thing has an S scaling in Faith, which is incredible. You're never going to hear me complaining about an S scaling. And the other thing is it's pure Faith scaling. You don't got to double dip into any stats to make this thing as good as it can get. It's just got pure Faith scaling. And the spell buff is actually surprisingly good and can outperform some other very strong staffs if you're using Faith. However, there are a lot of cons as well. The main one being it is another rank 2 Covenant item. And I just want to say, personally, FromSoft, I love FromSoft a lot, but screw you. This makes me upset. At this point, you're starting to make me upset. More cons, no intelligence scaling at all, and you still need intelligence to cast sorceries, meaning that fundamental flaw is still very much there. In addition to that, it doesn't actually add any extra scaling to dark sorceries, so if you're a dark sorcerer who maybe wants like a little bit more power, this is just not your staff. Overall, like for a Faith build who wants to dip into a little bit of sorcery stuff, this is like an incredible staff. That's why I put it above the others, is because it actually has so many things going for it. But for a good intelligence build, who is the primary people who are going to be using sorceries, you don't need this. It's just completely useless. Number 8 is the Heretic staff. Now, okay, there is a reason this is here, and it's solely for the spell buff, because the spell buff is actually really good. Like, it is like the best spell buff out of any of the staffs at around like 35 to 42 intelligence. But other than that, I can't find a single use for this staff. So the pros, you get spell buff, like a really good spell buff at certain parts of the game. Like 35 to 42, that's great. That is an excellent spot to have really good spell buff. You also get this one really early, which obviously that's great. We all love an early pickup staff. Plus, it is like a little bit of a longer staff, so you're getting slightly better range on sword sorceries. Now, the cons, and the first con is a big one, this one has higher stamina cost than other staffs. Now, I know you're probably saying to yourself, oh, stamina doesn't matter that much, and you're right, it doesn't. For Sorcerer, you don't need as much stamina as, say, like an Ultra Greatsword user. They require a lot more stamina, but having higher stamina cost per spell cast can add up and is annoying after a while. And other than that, though, it's also outclassed by the Sorcerer staff before and after that 35 to 42 intelligence margin. I think there's also another margin in there, but like, once again, the Sorcerer staff kind of just envelops this one. And I would still use the Sorcerer staff because it has very similar spell buff, and it it doesn't have that lower stamina cost. So it really depends. Like, you can obviously mix and match, and definitely you could argue that it's really down to preference, because it is. But me personally, I just prefer the Sorcerer's Staff in nearly every single situation. Number 7 is the Crystal Sage's Staff. In the right hands, this is an atomic bomb, but for more calm or nice sorcerers, this is one of the last I would actually recommend. And that's not to say it's bad, because it definitely has one of the most powerful skills in the game that it definitely doesn't show that it's strong, but it is very strong. Because the skill, when you use it, normally this skill gives a 10% damage increase to all sorceries cast with your staff. For the Crystal Sage's Staff, it gives 30% damage increase to all sorceries. And other than that, this staff has no pros. Now, that's not to say it's not good. That 30% damage increase is nuts. But compared to the cons, I would still say it's not perfect. The main con that comes with this is the fact that every single spell costs more FP to cast. And that's not so bad late game when you actually find this staff, but if you're an efficiency sorcerer or somebody who doesn't have a billion FP or isn't a pure caster who wants to just do damage, you don't need this staff. And the spell buff is super low. Like, it's way lower than other staffs of similar calibers, and the only thing that makes up for it is the skill. I personally hit for similar damage on the Court Sorcerer staff anyways, so I really don't want to deal with a crazy FP cost and a skill just to reach that type of damage. So I personally leave this one behind. It's fine, it's definitely fine, and it definitely has a really good, powerful niche, but it's just not for me. And number 6 is the Murky Long Staff. This and the Izalath Staff are pretty much the same. They just have different scalings, skills, and spell buffs. So they're pretty different, but they kind of have the same niche, and that's what I'm trying to get at here. And I personally believe you could flip these two around a bunch, and I would be very happy. I don't care. Like, these are so close together. It just depends on preference. So, why is this one just slightly lower? I don't want to talk about that because that's a little bit later. I want to talk about the pros. Why is the Murky Long Staff good? Well, first, it's long. Like, length is sometimes good, guys. I think we just have to admit sometimes longer is better. Anyways, but being long obviously gives it some benefits and even some downsides. But I'm going to get to that in a bit. Anyways, long staves, specifically this one as well, actually increase the range of sword sorceries, which means that you're going to be able to get a little bit more range on Fair and Flash sword and stuff like that. In addition to that, it gives intelligence and faith scaling to dark sorceries, meaning that for dark sorcerers, this is an excellent choice. And for dark sorcerers who really want a skill to boost their power, this is actually the better choice, because the skill of this staff increases the power of specifically dark sorceries by 20%, which is a really good number. Like, that's really, really good. In addition to that, this has no increased stamina cost, despite being a long staff. Normally, long staffs have increased stamina costs per spell casting that goes with them. This one, just for some reason, doesn't have that. And it even out-damages other staffs at certain thresholds due to its specifically dark power. Now, all that being said, the skill does only increase dark sorcery, so it's not like an all-rounder. If you want a little bit of a more all-rounded staff that still does a little bit more for dark sorcery, the Izalath staff absolutely clears. And the Murky Long Staff still does get outperformed later and at other thresholds. Plus, it has a late pickup in a DLC. So, all that being said, like, it's a good staff. It definitely is. It definitely deserves a high spot. But compared to some others, I just don't think it's as good as I would like it to be. And, I mean, if you want a good-looking staff, this is actually probably one of the better ones. I know it's a niche thing, but if you want a good-looking staff, this is, like, my favorite-looking staff in the game. Like, I would say this is my favorite-looking one. Alright, number 5, Izalath Staff. So, I'm mad at this one because somebody actually pointed out in the comments. I don't remember your name. I'm sorry. You can totally claim this in the comments. But somebody commented that the Izalath staff should absolutely also be a pyromancy catalyst. And ever since that flipped a switch to my head. I totally agree. And I am suing FromSoft. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. I don't have enough money. Anyways, Izalath staff. It's great, but it can't use pyromancies. That's a disgusting little bit. However, for a dark sorcery build, this is the other good option. Dark sorceries scales with intelligence and faith when using this, just like the Murky Lawn staff, and the skill actually affects all sorceries again. So if you want a little bit more of a general sorcery build that has some dark sorceries, and you place a little bit more emphasis on dark sorceries, this is an excellent staff. And let me tell you, it is a pretty decent staff with good spell buffs and scalings. Just straight up. The Murky Lawn staff has similar scalings, just I think an E in Faith, whereas this one has like a C or a D. I can't remember exactly. But basically, good scalings for dark sorcery stuff. Now, here's for the bad stuff. First things first, it has a higher stamina cost. Unlike the Murky Lawn staff, which just for some reason doesn't have that higher stamina cost despite being a long staff, this thing is still a long staff, so it has higher stamina cost. Other cons, it's in a meh location. Like, I don't really care enough to go seek it out sometimes unless I'm building for dark sorceries. And also, once again, no fire. Like, screw you, man. I totally wish it was pyromancy. You know what I mean? So, this really is just dark sorcery staff number 2. That's really it, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Number 4 is the Preacher's Arm. So battle mages, if you're a battle mage, you should love this thing. Not because it looks like a back scratcher for your underside, but because it has everything a sorcerer with bloodlust could actually want. First things first, the skill is fantastic for attacking and for pure casters, because sometimes you don't really want to switch to a different weapon for some unknown reason. And if that's the case, this skill actually is pretty decent. It's a interesting attack method, to say the least, but I mean, for a battle mage, that can sometimes be all you need. And it really does fit that niche well. I think it's a little bit lighter than some other staffs. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that skill being able to attack rather than just buff is obviously great. It also actually has a really good spell buff from 29 to 34 intelligence and 44 to 52 intelligence, which is great. Those niches are pretty great specifically for battle mages. Like, if I was a battle mage, I would be somewhere in probably both of those. But beyond all that, this thing also has an S scaling in intelligence. Even going on, like, beyond 52 intelligence, you're still going to be getting good spell buff. And an S scaling in intelligence is genuinely incredible. The only real con I have with this thing is the fact that it is a late find in a post DLC. Like, post-end DLC. So, yeah, it's a bit of a late find. And for some people, that's an automatic no matter how strong it is. However, despite all that, I firmly believe that this deserves this spot. And honestly, I'm still impressed by it even after trying it out like a bunch. This one's good. I'm gonna be real. And number 3 is the Witch Tree Branch. This is not here because it is a good staff. This is here because it's like a good ring. In fact, it's actually better than the ring version. So let me explain. If you're worried about cast speed, if you're afraid of the slow attacks that you find on stuff like Heavy Soul Arrow and stuff like that, you are not using this, because this completely changes that into, oh, I just don't care about cast speed anymore. And personally, I was the exact same way. I didn't want to even look at this staff until my pure caster playthrough. And that's when this thing became a permanent addition on my character. The main draw of this staff is not for what for casting sorcery itself, but instead for what it can do for your other staff. This thing instantaneously maxes out your cast speed. Period. That is it. And that is the only, the main and the only, in my opinion, draw of this staff. That is very, very, very strong, especially for pure casters, because that means you free up a slot that was previously being used for the Sage Ring. Now, it doesn't even require intelligence to get that effect. So if you're like a Faith caster or even a Pyromancy caster, you can just put this on and it'll work for your spells. That basically means this is generated, is no longer a staff, but a sidearm for all spellcasters everywhere. That is crazy. And best part, it doesn't even need to be the catalyst casting. Like as I already said, you don't need to be casting spells with this thing in order to gain that effect, which is necessary because this thing has awful scaling and spell buff. The only other problem is the fact that it requires it to be held in your offhand or hand to work, but that doesn't matter that much. Realistically, that doesn't matter. So when you are a pure caster or someone who just doesn't need a weapon to get your stuff done, this staff is practically a must-have. I have it equipped all the time, as I said. And the Sage's Ring actually gets outperformed by this staff. I just have this and the Court Sorcerer staff with Magic Clutch and the 2 Dragon Rings to just soft lock my nuts into the boss's mouth. That's just how strong the Witch Tree branch truly is. And number 2 is the Court Sorcerer staff. New Game Plus never had sorcery so strong. At least it didn't until this thing came along and took a 12 gauge slug right to the skull of Midir. This thing has the highest spell buff after 52 intelligence. And that goes all the way up to 99. That is the largest part of that is the largest margin of intelligence in the game. I don't know, what is that, I want to say 97, no, what am I saying? No, 47-ish levels of intelligence where this outperforms every other staff. That is big. And for New Game Plus sorcerers, or for people who plan on doing more than just the simple basic playthrough, it is the best staff for all of your needs. In addition, it has a pretty okay spot for pickups and requirements, considering the fact that this is the best staff for late game, and it isn't great for dark sorceries. The Izalath staff and Murky Lawn staff still outperform it for dark sorceries, but for any non-dark sorcery, this is the best staff for it. Now, there are some downsides to this. The main one is the fact that before 52 intelligence, it's pretty decent still, but it's not jaw-dropping. It is pretty similar to the Sorcerer staff for the most part, and let's be real, it is a little bit late game. So if you're leveling only intelligence, it is a little bit late game. But other than that, there's no downsides. It is an absolute beast. And personally, I use this staff for most of my intelligence playthroughs simply because it's just great. I didn't put it higher simply due to the last staff being just so dang accessible. You might as well throw it out because you'll find 10 more before even fighting Vort. And then number 1 spot goes to the Sorcerer's staff. Yeah, you could argue a lot of staffs deserve this number 1 spot, but let me just argue why I think the Sorcerer's staff deserves it. I put this one especially above the Court Sorcerers because, let's be honest, sometimes accessibility is better than just pure damage. And this staff demonstrates that with flying freaking colors and then some, with an insanely good spell buff for its early pickup. First thing first, the pros. This is the earliest staff you will get. Period. It's on multiple starting classes. Assassin, yeah, it has this staff. The Sorcerer, yep, it has this staff. Both of the primarily, intelligence-leaning classes have this staff. I wonder why. Well, even if you don't choose those guys, it still has a very easy pickup just in general. You can buy this thing for 300 souls. That is not a lot. In addition, this thing has the best spell buff early game from 0 to 15 intelligence. After that, you start getting into the fact that the Heretic staff is technically better and the Preacher's Hand is technically better, but no matter what part of the game you are at, this thing is almost always second place. This thing still has incredible spell buff at just about every single point, and maxed out gets an S scaling in intelligence. So, why would you ever need another staff? Sure, the Court Sorcerer is great. Sure, the Preacher Arm is fantastic. Sure, the Heretic's staff, like, technically outperforms it. But this staff just does everything well. It's competent at everything, somehow. Most of the time, you see something that's good at a lot of things, like weapon catalysts, and they're deficient in everything to balance it. In this one, it's the opposite. It's good at everything, and when I say good, I mean good. Like, this thing does everything and does it well. The main cons with this one is the fact that it does compete with other staves at sub 51 intelligence, and it kind of does fall off after 51 intelligence, like to let the court staff take over. But despite that, it still does have a really good spell buff. Personally, I find this staff to be the staff of the people. And let me tell you, I actually just love that. The fact that they're giving you a really good staff straight off the bat is one of the few things that I just love. Right there. So before you start dogging on my takes in the comments, drop a love letter to your favorite staff. I know I'm going to be doing the same. So, video's done. I didn't write an outro, so, I love you guys. See you in 2 weeks. And as always, happy hunting.